The road from the village was long, and the wind was cold. Petra pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. The cloth smelled of wood smoke and the lavender her mother used to keep in the chest. Her mother had been gone 3 years now. The lavender smell was fading. Soon there would be only the wood smoke. She walked with her head down. The mud on the road was thick. It pulled at her boots with each step. The boots were old. The leather had cracked across the toes. Cold water seeped in. Her feet ached from the cold and the long walking. She had been walking since the sun came up. The sun was now low in the sky. It made the bare trees look like black bones against the orange light. In her pocket, she held 1 coin. A single shilling. She closed her fingers around it. The metal was warm from her hand. It was all she had left in the world. She was going to the next town. There was a woman there who took in girls to sew. The pay was small. The hours were long. But it was work. It was a roof. It was something. Her father had told her once that a person could live on hope alone for a little while. Hope and bread, he had said, and bread was the easier of the two to find. He had been a kind man. He had laughed easily. He had died in the spring of a fever that took half the village. Now there was no father, no mother, no house. The house had gone to the cousin who claimed it. The cousin had given her 3 days to leave. She had left on the 2nd day. She did not want to give him the satisfaction of throwing her out on the 3rd. The wind cut through her shawl. She pressed her hand to her chest where the coin was kept. The path bent around a stand of old oaks. The branches creaked above her like an old door. Somewhere a crow called. The sound was sharp in the cold air. That was when she saw him. He was sitting on a fallen log just off the road. His head was down. His hat lay beside him in the mud. He had a coat that had once been fine, she could see that. The wool was good. The cut was good. But there was a tear at the shoulder and the buttons were dull. His boots were caked with the same mud as hers. His face, when he lifted it, was grey with cold and tired in a way that went deeper than one bad day. He was a young man, maybe near 30. His hair was dark and damp against his forehead. There was a fresh cut along his temple. The blood had dried in a thin line down his cheek. He had wiped at it once and made a smear. Petra slowed her steps. She knew she should keep walking. A woman alone on a road did not stop for strangers. Her father had taught her that. Her mother had taught her that. Every old woman in the village had taught her that. But the man did not look dangerous. He looked finished. He looked up at her. His eyes were grey. They were the colour of the sky just before a storm broke. He did not speak. He did not ask for anything. "Are you hurt?" she said. Her voice sounded small in the wide, cold afternoon. He took a breath. It seemed to cost him something. "I am well enough." "You are bleeding." "It is nothing." She stood there. The wind pushed her shawl against her side. She could feel the shilling in her pocket. 1 shilling. It was a bed for the night and a meal. It was the difference between sleeping in a barn and sleeping in a proper bed at the edge of the next town. She had been thinking about that bed for 3 hours of walking. "When did you last eat?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. "I cannot remember." There was no shame in his voice when he said it. There was no plea. He said it the way a man tells the time. It was a fact about the world. He had not eaten. He did not know when he would. Petra knelt down in front of him. The cold ground bit through the thin wool of her skirt. She took the coin out of her pocket. It was warm. It was the last warm thing she owned. "Take this," she said. She pressed it into his hand. His fingers were stiff with the cold. They closed around the coin slowly. "There is an inn down the road. 2 miles, no more. Tell them Petra Whitcomb sent you. They knew my father. They will give you bread and a place by the fire even if you only give them half. Keep the other half for tomorrow." He looked down at the coin in his palm. He looked up at her. The grey eyes were sharp now. The tiredness was still there, but underneath it something else was waking up. "This is your last," he said. It was not a question. "I have my 2 feet. she said. "And I am young. I will be at the next town before full dark if I keep moving. I do not need it as much as you do." She stood up. Her knees were stiff. She tried to smile at him so he would not feel the weight of what she had given. The smile felt strange on her cold face. "What is your name?" he asked. She did not know why she told him. She should have walked away. But she said, "Petra Whitcomb." "Petra," he said. He said it carefully, the way a man might handle something breakable. "You should go to the inn before the dark," she said. "The cold is worse after the sun is down." She turned. She started walking. She did not look back. She knew if she looked back she might cry, and she had decided 3 days ago that she would not cry again until she was inside walls of her own. She heard his voice behind her. "Miss Whitcomb." She did not stop. "Miss Whitcomb, I will not forget this." She walked on. The wind was at her back now. The mud sucked at her boots. She put one foot in front of the other. She did not allow herself to think about the warm bed at the inn that she would not be sleeping in tonight. She did not allow herself to think about the bread. She thought about the next step. And then the next. And then the next. The sun went down. The road went dark. She found a stone barn at the edge of a field. The door was open. There was straw on the floor. She lay down in the straw and pulled her shawl over her face and listened to the mice in the rafters and the wind in the broken roof. And she slept. She dreamed of grey eyes. In the morning she walked the rest of the way. By midday she was at the door of Mrs. Halford's sewing house. She told the woman she could stitch a straight seam and turn a hem without leaving a mark, and Mrs. Halford looked at her hands, at the calluses on the right thumb, and nodded. The pay was 8 shillings a month. The room was a corner of an attic shared with 3 other girls. The food was bread and broth. Petra unpacked her small bundle. She put away her mother's wedding ring, which was the only piece of her old life she had kept. She washed her face with cold water from the basin. She looked at herself in the cloudy little mirror on the wall. She was 18 years old. Her hair was the color of brown bread. Her eyes were the color of moss. There was nothing remarkable about her face except that it was the only face she had. She tied her hair back and went down to the workroom. She had been there for 3 days when the news came. The other girls were full of it. They whispered as they stitched. They held the cloth close to their faces, and the candles burned low, and they said the name over and over again as if saying it would summon him. The Earl of Marchwood had come home. Petra listened with half an ear. She did not know who the Earl of Marchwood was. She knew the village she had left had been on the edge of his lands, but she had never seen him. He had been gone for many years, the girls said. Some said he had been in the army. Some said he had been on a ship to India. Some said he had been hiding from a duel that went bad. They all agreed that he was young, and that he had been thought lost, and that now he had come back to take his title and his lands and to find a wife. "They say he is to marry a girl from up north," said a thin girl named Cecily, who was the best gossip in the room. An arrangement made by his late father before the old Earl died. A girl he has never met. The contract was signed 18 years ago. 18 years ago, said another girl. She would only have been a baby. That is how these things are done among the great families, Cecily said. She lowered her voice. And they say the bride's family has fallen on hard times. The match was meant to lift them up. There has been some scandal, some money lost. The girl has not been to court. She has not been seen anywhere. The Earl is going to find her now and bring her home. Petra bent her head over her work. The needle went in and out of the cloth. She did not know why the story made her chest feel tight. It had nothing to do with her. She was a sewing girl in an attic in a town she had walked to, with 1 coin in her pocket. But she thought of grey eyes in a cold afternoon, and she could not stop thinking of them. She told herself she was being foolish. The Earl of Marchwood was a man of great houses and great lands. The man on the log had been a stranger with a torn coat and dried blood on his face. They could not be the same. Still, she found that she was listening more carefully when the talk turned to him. 2 weeks went by. The work was hard. Her fingers were sore at the end of each day. She slept the deep sleep of the tired. She did not have time to be sad. She told herself this was a kind of mercy. On a Thursday in the second week, Mrs. Halford came up to the workroom with a face that was tighter than usual. She looked around at the girls until her eyes landed on Petra. "Whitcomb," she said. "There is a gentleman downstairs. He is asking for you by name." The room went still. The needles stopped. 6 pairs of eyes turned to look at Petra. "For me?" Petra said. "By name, Mrs. Halford said. And by your father's name as well. You had better come down." Petra set her work aside. Her hands were not quite steady. She smoothed her apron. She tucked a loose piece of hair behind her ear. She walked down the narrow stairs. The man who stood in the front room was tall. He wore a coat of dark green wool, well cut, with silver buttons. His boots were polished. His hair was dark and brushed back from a high forehead. The cut on his temple had healed to a thin pink line. It was him. He turned when she came in. The grey eyes found her face. He did not smile, but something in his expression changed, softened, the way a closed shutter opens just an inch. "Miss Whitcomb," he said. Petra stood very still. Her hand was on the doorframe. She did not let it go. "Sir," she said. He took a step toward her. Then he stopped. He seemed to remember Mrs. Halford was in the room. He inclined his head. "Madam," he said to Mrs. Halford, "I would speak with Miss Whitcomb a moment. Privately, if it is permitted." Mrs. Halford looked at him, and at Petra, and back at him. There was something about the way he stood that did not invite argument. She gave a stiff curtsy and stepped back into the hall, leaving the door open a polite inch. He waited until her footsteps had gone down the passage. Then he turned to Petra. "You are wondering why I am here," he said. "I am wondering many things, sir," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. It was almost a smile. "I imagine you are. You look better than the last time I saw you." "I am better. Your cut has healed. It was nothing, as I said." She nodded. She did not know what to do with her hands. She folded them in front of her apron. "Did you find the inn?" she asked. "I did." "And the bread?" "I had a fine meal," he said. His voice was low. "There was something careful in it, and a bed by the fire. They were kind. They asked after you. I told them you had gone on toward this town. Thank you for coming to tell me. You did not need to. That is not why I have come." She waited. He drew a breath. "My name is Crispin Ashcombe. I am the Earl of Marrowfield." The room tilted a little. Petra put her hand more firmly on the doorframe. She did not say anything for a long moment. She heard a clock somewhere ticking. She heard a cart passing in the street. She heard her own breath, which had gone shallow. "The Earl," she said. "Of Marrowfield." "Yes, the Earl who has come home." Yes, she looked at his coat, at the silver buttons, at the polished boots. She looked at his face. It was the same face. The grey eyes, the dark hair, the line of his jaw. But he stood differently now. He stood like a man who had been told his whole life that rooms would arrange themselves around him. "I gave you my last coin," she said. The words were out before she could stop them. "You did. You let me. I did." "Why?" He was quiet. He looked down at the floor for a moment. When he looked up again, the grey eyes were very steady. "I had been attacked the night before," he said. "2 men on the road. They took my horse. They took my purse. They struck me. I made it to the village, but I did not want anyone to know who I had been. I was not ready. I had been away too long. I had only just come back to England. I wanted to see, before I went home, what my country had become without me. I wanted to know if it was still the country I remembered. And I sat on that log thinking I had made a mistake. That I should have stayed where I was. That England had nothing left to show me, but mud and cold and men who hit a stranger for a horse. And then a girl in a thin shawl knelt in the mud in front of me and gave me her last shilling and walked away into the wind. Petra found that she could not look at him. She looked at the buttons on his coat instead. They were small. They were very fine. They were each marked with some kind of small bird in flight. "I did not know who you were," she said. "I know. I did not give it to an earl." "I know. I gave it to a man who looked finished." "Yes," he paused. "That is why I had to find you." She lifted her eyes. "How did you find me?" I asked. "The innkeeper remembered your name. He knew your father. He had heard that you had gone to Mrs. Halford. It was not difficult." "Why?" He hesitated. "May I sit?" She nodded. There were 2 chairs by the front window. He took one. He gestured at the other. She sat. The chair was hard under her. Her hands trembled in her lap. She pressed them together to make them stop. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, "I came home for a reason. There is a contract, signed by my father many years ago. A marriage was arranged for me. The bride was a child then. So was I, very nearly. My father is dead now. So is hers. The contract still stands. I have come home to honor it." She looked at her hands. "I have heard the talk. The girl I am to marry is named Petra. Petra Whitcomb." The room did not tilt this time. It simply went still. She heard the clock. She heard the cart. She heard nothing else for a long moment. "That cannot be," she said. "It is. My father was a country gentleman, a small one. He had a house and some fields. He was not," she stopped. "He was not the kind of man whose daughter is promised to an earl. He was a friend of my father," Crispin said. His voice was gentle. They had been at school together. They had served together when they were young. "My father was rich. Yours was not. But my father trusted yours, as he trusted few men. And there was a debt, not of money, a debt of honor. When my father lay dying, he told me. He said he had arranged for me to marry the daughter of his oldest friend. He said the girl's family would not know I was coming for many years, because the contract was kept by his solicitor. He said the girl herself would not know until she was of age. He said this was the one thing he asked of me." Petra felt her eyes fill. She blinked hard. "My father never told me," she whispered. "He did not know all of it, perhaps, or he did, and meant to tell you when you were older. I do not know. I am sorry. He died 3 years ago. I know. I am sorry for that too. I learned of it only when I returned. I had thought I would come and present myself to him first, properly. I had thought I would meet you under his roof. I had not thought I would find you." He stopped. He looked at her apron. He looked at her sore red hands. In a sewing house she finished for him. "Yes," she laughed. It was a small bitter sound. "Sir, I am a stranger to you. You owe me nothing. Whatever your father wrote on paper, it was for a girl he imagined. Not for me. Not for a girl in an apron with 3 shillings to her name. 2 shillings now, I think," he said quietly. "You gave one away." She looked up at him sharply. The grey eyes were not laughing. They were watching her with a steady patience that was harder to bear than mockery would have been. "I did not come here to play with you," she said. "If this is a jest, it is not a jest, Miss Whitcomb. Then why have you come yourself? Why not send your man of business, or a lawyer, or anyone? Why come to this house with the door standing open and Mrs. Halford listening in the passage?" He was quiet again. He seemed to be choosing his words with care. "Because," he said, "before I knew you were the girl in the contract, I had already decided to find you. I had decided that on the road, before I even reached my own gate. The contract was a thing I learned of the next day. When my solicitor told me the name, He stopped. He shook his head slowly. I did not believe it at first. I thought he had read the paper wrong. And when you knew he had not? I told him I would go myself. I told him I would not send a stranger. The girl I was to marry had given me her last shilling without knowing who I was. I would not now send a man in livery to fetch her like a parcel." Petra was silent. She could hear her own heart in her ears. "I am not the girl you were promised," she said at last. "Not really. The girl in the contract was a baby. The girl in the contract had a father with a name and a house and a place in the world. I have none of those things now. The contract was for someone else. The contract was for you. It was for the daughter of a country gentleman. I am the daughter of nothing now. You are the daughter of a man my father trusted. That is not nothing. That is in fact the part of you that matters most to the agreement. And what of the part of me that has been working in an attic for 15 days? What of the part of me that has calluses on her hands? What does your family say of that? My family is myself, he said. My mother is dead. My father is dead. I have no brothers and no sisters. I have an aunt who keeps house for me, and she has known of the contract since it was made. She is waiting at Marchwood now. She is, I think, half mad with curiosity to meet you. Petra did not know what to say. She looked at her hands again. The skin on her thumb was rough. The nail on her smallest finger was bitten. She thought of the great house she had never seen, with its many rooms, and an aunt waiting in one of them, and she felt a small wild laugh come up in her throat. She swallowed it down. I cannot, she said. Miss Whitcomb, I cannot. Sir, my lord, whatever I am to call you, I cannot walk out of this house with you on the strength of a paper my father never spoke of, and a kindness done in the mud. It is not a thing a sensible girl would do. He nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? I have spent the last 4 years in places where I had to be sensible to live through the next morning. Yes, I understand. She looked at him then, full on. He was watching her with that steady, patient look. There was no anger in him. There was no impatience. There was, she thought, something almost like relief, as if her refusal to leap into his carriage was the answer he had hoped for. Then what do you propose, she said. I propose, he said carefully, that you do not give me an answer today, or tomorrow, or in a week. I propose that I take a room at the inn in this town, and that I call on you each day, here in this front room, with the door open, and Mrs. Halford in the passage if she likes, and that you and I become acquainted. You will continue your work. You will continue to keep your wages and your place. You will owe me nothing. At the end of 3 months, you will tell me your answer. If it is no, I will leave, and you will not see me again. If it is yes, we will marry in the spring. 3 months. 3 months. And if Mrs. Halford does not allow it, a small smile touched his mouth at last. I think she will. I have already spoken with her. She seemed agreeable to the idea of a sewing girl being visited by an earl. I believe she sees it as good for business. Petra laughed. She did not mean to, but she did. It was the first laugh she had laughed in many weeks. It surprised her. It surprised him too. The smile on his face widened just a little. 3 months is a long time, sir, she said. It is exactly long enough, I think. She looked down. She looked up. She nodded once. 3 months then he stood. He did not bow grandly. He simply inclined his head, the way he had to Mrs. Halford, and went to the door. Until tomorrow, Miss Whitcomb. Until tomorrow, my lord. He went out. She heard him take his hat from Mrs. Halford. She heard the front door open and close. She heard his footsteps on the cobbles outside. Only then did she let her hands shake. He came the next afternoon. He came the day after that. He came every day for 2 weeks. He did not stay long. He sat in the front room with the door open. They drank weak tea from Mrs. Halford's second-best cups. They talked. He asked her about her father. She told him stories. He listened the way he had listened on the log, fully, without hurry, as if her words were worth the time it took to say them. He told her about his own father, who had been a stern man but a fair one. He told her about his years away. He had been in India for 3 of them, and in Spain for 1. He had been shot in the shoulder once, and stabbed in the leg once, and he had had a fever that nearly killed him. He told these things without making them grand. He told them the way another man might tell about a long walk in bad weather. She told him about her mother, who had loved gardens. She told him about the cousin who had taken the house. She did not cry when she spoke of these things. She had cried herself out of tears. What did your mother grow? He asked her one afternoon. The smell of stewing onions came up from Mrs. Halford's kitchen below. The light through the window was thin and white. "Lavender," she said, "and roses, and a herb my father called marjoram, which she used in everything, and a small white flower that came up in the cracks of the path. She said it found its own way and we should not pull it up." "Marjoram," he repeated. He said the word as if he were saving it. 3 weeks in, he did not come. Petra worked all morning. She listened for the bell at the door. It did not ring. She tried not to look at the clock. She did not eat much at the midday meal. By the afternoon, she was telling herself that this was for the best. He had thought better of it. He had remembered who he was and who she was. She was not surprised. She was not even hurt, she told herself. She was only herself, the girl with the shilling, the girl who walked. The bell did not ring all day. That evening Mrs. Halford came up to the attic. She had a small folded paper in her hand. She gave it to Petra, without comment. The paper was thick. It was sealed with red wax. The wax had been pressed with a ring, a small bird in flight, the same as the buttons on his coat. Petra broke the seal with her thumb. The note was short. "Miss Whitcomb, I am called away on a matter that cannot wait. I will return as soon as I am able. I beg your patience. C. A." She read it 3 times. She folded it. She tucked it into her sleeve. She did not know why she felt as if a weight had been lifted. She told herself she did not. But that night she slept better than she had in many nights. He returned 5 days later. He came in the morning, before the workroom even opened. He stood in the front room with his hat in his hand. There was new mud on his boots and a tired look in his eyes that she remembered from the log. "I am back," he said. "I see that you are. I am sorry to have left so suddenly. You owe me no apology, sir." He looked at her. "I owe you a great many things, Miss Whitcomb, but I will not list them now." She did not ask him where he had gone. He did not tell her. He sat. He drank Mrs. Halford's tea. He listened as she told him about a wedding gown the shop was making for a merchant's daughter. He left at the usual hour. He came again the next day. It was 4 days after his return that Cecily told her. They were in the workroom. The other girls had gone down to fetch the midday bread. Cecily was sitting close to Petra. Her face was full of something she could not keep in. "I heard a thing," Cecily said, "from my cousin. My cousin works in the kitchens at the Boar and Crown, where your gentleman has been staying." "He is not my gentleman," Petra said. She did not look up from her work. "Whatever he is." "My cousin heard a thing. From his groom." Petra waited. "You know the old woman at the end of Cattle Lane? The blind one who sells herbs from a basket by the bridge? I have seen her. She has a granddaughter. The girl is 12, perhaps. She has the cough. She has had it for 2 winters. The doctors said there was nothing to be done. There is a medicine, a thing from the south, an oil pressed from a plant that grows in Italy. It costs a great deal of money. The old woman has been trying to earn the price of it for 2 years. She had not got near. Petra's needle stopped. "Your gentleman," Cecily said, "the one who was called away, he was not called away. Not in the way the note said. He rode to London. He rode there in 2 days, my cousin said, and he came back in 2 days, and in between he bought the oil himself from a man on the docks, and he paid more than triple what it should have cost, because the man knew he wanted it badly. He gave it to the old woman through her granddaughter, in the back lane behind the church at night, and he made the girl swear she would not say who had given it. He said he was passing through. He said he was no one. He said if anyone asked, the oil came from a charity the granddaughter had written to." Petra looked up. Cecily's face was alight with the pleasure of a story well told. "How does your cousin know it was him?" Petra asked. Her voice was not quite steady. "Because the groom saw the bottle in his saddlebag when he was unsaddling the horse, and the groom asked, and the gentleman told him only that it was for a child, and to say nothing of it. The groom said nothing for 3 days. He said nothing until last night when he had drunk too much. Then he said it to my cousin. My cousin said it to me. I have said it to you, and I will say it to no one else. I swear it on my mother." Petra set down her work. She put both her hands flat on the table. She looked at them for a long moment. They were trembling. "Why are you telling me this, Cecily?" "Because," Cecily said, "I think you ought to know what kind of man he is before the 3 months are up." She squeezed Petra's arm and stood and went down to fetch the bread. Petra sat at the table for a long time. The sun moved a finger's width across the wood. She did not move with it. She thought of grey eyes in a cold afternoon, and a man on a log saying, "I will not forget this," and a small bottle of oil in a back lane behind a church. She did not tell him. She knew. She did not know how. She did not want him to think she had been spying. She did not want to spoil it by making him say words about it. She thought, perhaps, that if she said nothing, she could keep the picture of it whole inside her and look at it whenever she needed to. But she watched him differently after that. She watched the way he stood when Mrs. Halford's old cat brushed against his boots. She watched the way he asked the maid her name and remembered it the next day. She watched the way he set his cup down so it would not make a sound on the table. None of these things had a thing to do with her. They were what he was when no one important was looking. She had been the no one important on the log, and now she understood that she had been seeing him plainly all along. 6 weeks went by. Then, on a Saturday in the deep cold of winter, the woman came. Petra was in the workroom when she heard the bell. She heard Mrs. Halford's voice, very polite, and another voice, sharp and cold, and used to being listened to. She heard her own name. She set aside her work. The woman who stood in the front room was tall. She wore a coat of grey fur. Her hair was the dark gold of old wheat. Her face was very fine, the kind of fine that does not need to be kind. She was perhaps 25 years old. She had 3 rings on her fingers. She turned when Petra came in. She looked at her from her boots to her hair, slowly, and back down again. "You are Petra Whitcomb," the woman said. "I am. My name is Marielle Penrose." She let the name hang in the air. When Petra did not react, she let out a small sound that was almost a laugh. "You do not know my name?" "Of course you do not. He has not had the grace to tell you." "Who?" Petra said, but she already knew. "Crispin," the woman said. "Crispin Ashcombe, the Earl of Marrowfield, the man who has been drinking tea in this front room every afternoon for 2 months." She walked to the window. She did not sit. She turned. "Before he went away 4 years ago, he was promised to me. Not by paper, by word. By his own mouth, in the rose garden at Penrose Hall, in front of my mother and his. He gave me his word. He gave me a ring. I still have it." She held up her hand. The 3rd ring on her smallest finger had a small green stone. He left for India because his father ordered it. "He went to make a man of himself," he said. "He swore he would come back to me." Petra stood very still. The room was warm. She could smell the coal in the grate. She could hear the clock. And then Marielle Penrose said, "His father died." And he came home. And he found a paper in the solicitor's box, written long ago, when he was a boy and I was not yet born, that promised him to some countryman's daughter he had never seen. And he chose to honor the paper instead of the word. "Do you understand what that means, Miss Whitcomb? Do you understand what he has done?" Petra did not answer. "It means," the woman said, walking closer, "that he has thrown over a woman of his own rank, who has loved him since she was 16, in favor of a sewing girl with mud on her shoes. It means he is making the worst mistake of his life. It means that you, my dear, are going to be the wife of a man who will resent you every day for the rest of his life. He will not say so. He is too well bred to say so. But he will look at you across his table, in his grand house, with all his fine friends watching, and he will know what he gave up. And so will you." She stopped. She was close now. Petra could smell her perfume, something heavy and sweet that did not belong in the small front room. Marielle Penrose looked down at her, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You will be the cheap coin he took up because you were lying in the dirt at his feet, and when he tires of the novelty, he will remember the gold he left behind." The words landed like a slap. The room did not go silent because no one had been speaking. But Petra felt the silence inside her, a deep, cold silence that was not anger and not grief, but something quieter and more final than either. She did not raise her voice. She did not weep. She looked Mariel Penrose in the eye. "Madam," she said, "I have not yet agreed to marry him." The woman blinked. "I have made him no promise. He has made me no claim. Whatever was once said in your rose garden was said between you and him, and I have no part in it. If you wish to speak to him, you must speak to him. I am not the door to that conversation. I am only a girl who sews. Good afternoon." She turned and walked from the room. She did not slam the door. She closed it carefully behind her. She went up the narrow stairs to the workroom. She sat down at her table. She picked up her needle. The other girls stared at her. She did not look at them. She put the needle through the cloth. It went through cleanly. She did not let her hand shake until she was certain Mariel Penrose had left the house. She did not tell him. She did not know if Mariel Penrose would tell him herself. She did not know what she wanted him to do if she did. She wanted to know whether what the woman had said was true, not the part about the rose garden. That, she found she could believe. He had been 4 years gone. He had been a young man before he left. Young men make promises in rose gardens. That was the way of the world. She wanted to know whether he would resent her, whether he would look across the table in his grand house and remember the gold he had left behind. She did not know how to ask him that question. He came the next afternoon. He sat in his usual chair. He drank his tea. He told her a small thing about his aunt at Marchwood, who had written to him about a leak in the orangery roof. He laughed about it. The laugh was the same laugh as always. Petra watched him. She did not know how to begin. In the end, she did not have to. He set down his cup. He looked at her. "Miss Whitcomb, something is wrong. It is nothing. It is not nothing. You have not laughed once today." She looked at her hands. She looked up. "A woman came to see me yesterday." His face changed. It did not move exactly, but something behind it stilled. "Tell me," he said. She said her name was Mariel Penrose. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked older than he had a minute before. "What did she say to you?" Petra told him. She told him plainly. She left out nothing. She told him about the rose garden, the ring with the green stone, the promise made in front of 2 mothers. She told him about being the cheap coin. She kept her voice steady. She did not cry. When she was done, he was silent for a long moment. He looked at the fire in the grate. He looked at the floor. "What she told you of the rose garden is true," he said. "Or, it is half true. Mariel and I were young. I was 21. She was 16. Our mothers had been friends. Mariel told me she loved me. I told her I cared for her. She gave me a ring. I gave her one back. There was no formal promise of marriage. There was no contract. There was a great deal of feeling on her side, and not as much as she thought on mine. My father, who was still living then, called me into his study and told me I was being a fool. He told me about the paper. He told me I had been promised to another since I was a boy. He told me to ride to Penrose Hall the next morning and undo whatever I had done. And did you? I tried. Mariel would not have it. She wept. She said her mother had told everyone. She said if I broke from her, she would be ruined. She begged me to wait, to go to India, to do my service, to come back when I had grown into a man, and then choose freely. She said her own ring would be only between us, until then. I agreed. I should not have. I was 21 and I did not know how to refuse a girl who wept. He paused. When I came home 4 years later, I went to her first. I told her I could not honor what had been said in the garden. I told her about the contract. I told her I would honor that one instead. She was angry. She told me I would regret it. I left. Was the contract why you would not have her? No. His voice was very quiet. The contract was the door I walked through. But I would not have her even if there had been no contract. I had grown into a different man. She had not grown at all. Petra looked at the fire. She said you would resent me. She is wrong. She said you would look across your grand table and remember the gold you left behind. He stood up. He walked to the window. He turned back. His face was set. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, "I do not have a grand table. I have a long table. The wood is scratched in one corner because my father carved his initials into it when he was 8, and his father did not punish him for it. I have a house that needs repairs. I have an aunt who plays cards badly. I have a herd of cattle and a great deal of land and a name. I have those things." He paused. "I do not have a grand life. I never did." My father saw to that. He was the kind of man who believed a title was a duty, not a prize. He raised me the same. If you are looking for a man who will set you at the head of a grand table to envy you and resent you, that man is not me. I do not have it in me. I have not got the room in me. I have only got room for the work, and for the people I find worth keeping." He stopped. He took a breath. "And I found you on a road in the cold," he said. "Before I knew your name, before I knew the paper, I found you and you gave me your last shilling and you walked into the wind. I would not trade that, Miss Whitcomb, for all the rose gardens in England. I would not trade it for 10 Marielle Pen roses. I would not trade it if you had nothing in the world but the apron you stand in. That is what I have to say." The room was very still. Petra could hear the clock. She could hear her own breath. She could see the small white scar on his temple where the cut had healed. She did not say anything. She did not trust her voice. He sat down again. He picked up his cup. The tea was cold. He drank it anyway. After a long time she said, "I did not believe her." "Not really." "I know. I came close, for a little while last night, but not all the way. I know. I would like the 3 months to finish, all the same. As would I." He left at the usual hour. He bowed to her at the door. He did not touch her hand. He had not touched her hand once in all the weeks of his visiting. The next morning, a letter came for Petra. It was on plain paper, not sealed with wax. It was from the village she had grown up in. It was from old Mrs. Linley, who had been her mother's friend. It said the cousin who had taken her house had been turned out. The deed had been examined by a London lawyer. There had been a mistake in it. The house and the small fields went, in truth, to Petra. Mrs. Linley said the lawyer had come at the request of a gentleman who had paid for the work and asked nothing in return. Mrs. Linley said the gentleman's name had not been given. Petra folded the letter. She did not weep. She tucked it into her sleeve, beside the older folded note that she had not been able to bring herself to throw away. She did not say anything to him about it that day, or the next. The 8th week passed. The 9th. The cold deepened. The streets froze in the mornings. The sewing house was warm, with the smell of coal smoke and bread. Petra worked her hours. She drank her tea with him in the afternoons. She walked once with him in the small park at the edge of the town, with Mrs. Halford watching from a bench at a polite distance. The path was icy. He offered his arm. She took it. It was the first time she had touched him since she had pressed the shilling into his palm. His arm was steady under her hand. He smelled of cold air and the soap he used, and something underneath that she could not name. In the 10th week he asked her about her mother's garden. "What did you say grew in the cracks of the path?" "A small white flower," she said. "My mother called it stone knot. She said it found its own way." He nodded. He did not say more. The 11th week Mrs. Halford had a fall on the cellar stairs. She turned her ankle badly. The doctor came. He said she was to stay off the foot for a fortnight. The household ran on Mrs. Halford. The orders did not get sent out. The accounts did not get done. The girls were unsettled. That afternoon when he came, Petra was tired and her eyes were dark from a poor night's sleep. He took one look at her and asked what had happened. She told him. He said, "Will you allow me to send someone?" "Sir, you cannot send your servants into a sewing house. I have a woman at Marchwood. Her name is Sarah. She is 60 years old and she has run a house since she was 15. She is bored half to madness because my aunt has the place too well in hand. If I write to her tonight, She will be here on Wednesday. She will stay until Mrs. Halford can stand. She will not be paid by Mrs. Halford, she will be paid by me. She will not say a word about it to anyone." Petra opened her mouth to refuse. She closed it again. "Will you let me?" he asked. She nodded. Sarah arrived on Wednesday. She was small and grey, and she did not waste a word. By Friday the orders were going out again. The accounts were neat. Mrs. Halford was being fed broth in her own bed and lectured about her foot. The girls were calm. Petra watched all of this. She watched it the way she had watched the bottle of oil and the lawyer's letter and the way he set down his cup. She did not say anything about it to him. He did not say anything about it to her. In the 12th week, on a Sunday afternoon, he came to the sewing house at the usual hour. Petra was waiting in the front room. She had put on her best dress, which was not very fine, and she had brushed her hair until it shone. She had her mother's wedding ring in the pocket of her apron, where she had been keeping it. He came in. He took off his hat. He looked at her. He stood very still. He did not speak. She did not speak. Time stretched. She could feel it stretching. The clock on the mantel ticked. A cart went by outside. A child laughed somewhere in the street. The light through the window was thin and silver. She watched his face. He watched hers. She could see him deciding not to rush her. She could see him deciding to let her speak first if she wished, or to let her not speak at all if she did not. She had been thinking for many weeks about what she would say. She had practiced it many times in the attic at night, with the other girls asleep around her. She had thought of many fine speeches. She had thought of how she would tell him about the bottle of oil, and the lawyer, and Sarah. She had thought of how she would thank him for the quiet kindnesses that had nothing to do with winning her. In the end, she did none of those things. She said, yes. He let out a breath she had not known he had been holding. The shutter behind his eyes opened all the way for the first time. He did not move quickly. He set his hat down on the table. He crossed the room with 3 slow steps. He stopped in front of her. "Petra," he said. "Yes," she said again. He held out his hand. She put hers in it. His fingers closed around hers. They were warm. She could feel the small calluses on his palm from the riding he had been doing on the long road between this town and Marchwood and back. Every week. That was all. He did not kiss her. He did not pull her against him. He held her hand for a long moment in the quiet front room, with Mrs. Halford pretending not to be listening from the passage, and the clock ticking on the mantel, and the cold light coming in through the window. He held her hand and looked at her face as if he were memorizing it. Then he let her go. "In the spring, then," he said. "In the spring," she said. They married at the end of April, in the small stone church near Marchwood. The day was warm. There were primroses in the hedges along the lane. The church smelled of beeswax and old wood and the lilac that someone had set in a jar by the altar. Mrs. Halford was there, with her ankle well mended. Sarah was there. The blind old woman from Cattle Lane was there, and her granddaughter, who had grown 2 inches in 3 months, and whose cough was gone. Cecily was there, in a dress she had stitched herself, looking very pleased with the whole business. Mariel Penrose was not there. Petra had not invited her, and neither had he. The aunt at Marchwood, whose name was Beatrice, took Petra into a small parlour before the ceremony, and looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "He has been writing to me about you for 3 months. I am very tired of his letters. I am glad to have you in person at last." She kissed Petra's cheek. Her own cheek was soft and smelled of rose-water. Petra found that she was not afraid of the aunt at all. The ceremony was short. The vows were the old ones. Petra heard her own voice say them, and his voice say them back, and she could not believe how steady both voices were. He put a ring on her finger. It was a plain gold band. He had asked her if she wanted anything finer, and she had said no. After, they went back to the house. The house was large but not grand. It was old and warm, and the wood was dark, and there were many windows. The orangery had a new roof. There was a fire in every room, because Beatrice had ordered it so. There was a long table in the dining room with a scratch in one corner, where a boy named Crispin's father had carved his initials. Petra and Crispin sat at the table together. They ate the wedding dinner with Beatrice and Mrs. Halford and the others. They drank a little wine. They listened to the speeches, which were short, because no one at Marchwood was the kind of person who made long speeches. Petra looked across the table at her husband once, in the middle of it all, and he looked back at her, and neither of them looked away for a long moment. Then she laughed, quietly, because she could not help it, and he smiled, the slow, real smile she had been learning the shape of for 3 months, and Beatrice saw them both and said nothing, but Petra saw her hide her own smile in her napkin. 1 year later, in the orangery whose roof no longer leaked, Petra stood beside a small bed of herbs. The marjoram was thriving, the roses were just beginning to bud. In the cracks of the stone path, a small white flower had come up. Petra did not pull it. She had told the gardener not to, when he had asked. She had said, "That one finds its own way, and we shall let it." Her husband came in through the glass door. He brought the cold spring air with him. He stood beside her. He looked down at the small white flower in the path. "Stone not," he said. "You remembered. I remember everything you have ever told me." She did not say anything to that. She put her hand through his arm. They stood together in the warm, wet air of the orangery, with the smell of marjoram and damp earth and the lilac that Beatrice had cut for the hall, and they looked at the small white flower in the crack of the path. Somewhere in the house a door closed quietly. Somewhere outside a horse called to another horse. The light came through the glass roof and fell across her hand on his sleeve. He did not say he loved her. He had never said it in words in all the months since the wedding. He showed it instead, in the marjoram he had ordered planted before she arrived, in the way he held the door for the old housekeeper, in the way he wrote to Mrs. Halford every month to ask after her ankle, in the way he set his cup down so it would not make a sound on the table when she was reading. She had learned, in the year of her marriage, that words were the smallest of the things a man like him gave. She did not say she loved him either, but she pressed her hand a little tighter against his sleeve, and he, without looking at her, pressed his arm a little tighter against her hand. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If this moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.